I still remember the moment I saw that email, like a punch to the gut I never saw coming. My name's Ryan, 38 years old, and I thought I knew my wife, Jenna, better than anyone. We'd been married for 10 years, built a life together, or so I thought. She told me she was going on a weekend trip, just the girls. A chance to unwind, catch up with old friends. I trusted her. I wanted to believe it was harmless, just what she needed. But something in me didn't settle right, a whisper I tried to silence. Then the email arrived. A message from a stranger with a subject line that made my hands tremble. Photos from your wife's trip. I opened it cautiously. The pictures were clear. Jenna wasn't on some innocent weekend getaway. She was somewhere far from the girls' trip story, with a man I'd never met, their faces close, laughing, intimate. I stared at the screen, disbelief flooding me. My mind raced through every conversation, every plan she'd made in the past weeks. The little inconsistencies I'd shrugged off suddenly screamed betrayal. I didn't reply to the email. I didn't call Jenna or confront her immediately. I shut down my laptop and sat in silence, feeling numb but awake in a way I never had before. Something inside me snapped, but I was calm, too calm because I knew this wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a reckoning. For years, I had been the steady one, the one who held things together when life got messy. Now, it was time for me to face a truth I never wanted to see and to find a way to fight back. Not with anger or shouting, but with something far more powerful. This was my story. The story of how I uncovered the lies, gathered the proof, and took control. Because sometimes the people closest to you have the darkest secrets. And sometimes justice only comes when you're ready to look behind the carefully crafted smile. Before the email, there was a slow, creeping doubt I tried to ignore. Jenna's just the girls' trip wasn't the first time I caught glimpses of something off. Small things, easy to dismiss if I wanted to. She started coming home later, always with vague excuses. Work was suddenly busier. The texts on her phone beeped late into the night, but she'd quickly lock the screen whenever I walked into the room. There was a shift in her tone when she spoke to me, more distant, rehearsed, like she was protecting something. I told myself to trust her. We'd built years of history, memories that mattered. I didn't want to be the jealous husband chasing shadows. But those little things gnawed at me. I catch her glancing at her phone and quickly hiding it. I noticed changes in her routine, days out I wasn't invited to, plans she was vague about. It wasn't the betrayal yet. It was the silence between us that started to grow, a gap filled with secrets. I tried to ask, to open conversations, but she deflected or gave half answers. The warm connection we once had was fraying at the edges. Every instinct told me to confront her, but I held back. I knew anger would only push her away. I needed clarity first, proof. I wanted to understand what was happening before breaking everything apart. Those weeks leading to the trip were tense in a way neither of us acknowledged. I watched but stayed quiet, gathering fragments like a puzzle I dreaded completing. I was preparing myself, not just for a fight, but for the truth, whatever it might be. And then the email arrived. The silence shattered. The whispered doubts exploded into reality. What I'd feared and hoped against had become undeniable. But even in that moment of shock, I wasn't ready to lose control. I knew this wasn't just about heartbreak. This was a battle, and I was going to win on my terms. Jenna had her story down cold. "It's just the girls," she said, with that calm tone that made you want to believe her. She painted the weekend as innocent, a little getaway, catching up with old friends she hadn't seen in years. No drama, no secrets, just laughter and wine. Everyone else bought it. Our friends, her family, even me at first. How could I not? The details were so carefully laid out. The group text with photos of beaches and brunches, the casual check-ins, the wish you were here messages. The perfect alibi. But perfect alibis are the hardest to trust when something inside you is screaming otherwise. The more I listened, the more the pieces didn't fit. She claimed to be at a spa retreat, but the picture she sent didn't match the location she described. The friends she said she was with, well, I knew some of them weren't actually there. I wanted to ask questions, but I couldn't. Not yet. She seemed so convincing. The smile was real enough, but it didn't reach her eyes. I caught a flicker of something, hesitation, maybe guilt, before she masked it with practiced ease. It wasn't just the trip itself. It was the sudden distance between us, the way she avoided plans with me, the way her phone was always face down, the little lies about where she was and who she was with. I tried to hold on to what we had, the years, the promises. But deep down, I was bracing for impact. I knew the perfect alibi was just a shield. Behind it, the truth was waiting, and I was about to uncover it. When that email came through, I finally understood how carefully she'd constructed the illusion and how deeply I'd been fooled. After seeing those photos, I knew I couldn't just sit back anymore. Trust had shattered, replaced by a burning need to uncover every piece of the truth. But I wasn't going to jump in screaming or accusing. That would only make me look desperate, and I needed to stay sharp. So I made a decision. I would investigate quietly, carefully. No das confrontations. No angry texts or late-night arguments. I needed facts, proof, something undeniable. And I needed a plan. I started by going through everything I could access, her social media, her phone habits, even her shared accounts. I paid attention to small details, the kinds that don't show up in a typical argument. Receipts for places she never mentioned, unfamiliar names popping up in messages, subtle changes in her routine. It was like piecing together a jigsaw puzzle where some of the pieces were missing or deliberately hidden. Every little clue mattered. I kept notes, screenshots, anything that might help me build the case I needed. I even set up some quiet monitoring, the kind of subtle observation no one notices until it's too late. I wasn't spying to punish. I was gathering what I needed to protect myself, and if it came to it, to fight back. I told myself this wasn't about revenge yet. It was about survival, about taking control of a situation spinning out of my grasp. I had always been the steady one, the problem solver, the man who fixed things. Now, I was on a new mission, to uncover the lies and take back what was mine. The days stretched on, with a tense silence between us. She talked less about her plans and more about needing space, while I played the calm husband, quietly watching, waiting. I knew the truth was close, and when I found it, there would be no turning back. The first real crack in her story came when I stumbled upon a photo she'd forgotten to delete. It was hidden in an album labeled Vacation, but it wasn't the sunny beach getaway she'd claimed. Instead, it showed a dimly lit room, 2 drinks on a table, and her laughing with a man whose face was turned away. I froze staring at it. I'd never seen this guy before. My heart slammed against my ribs as the quiet truth settled in. She wasn't alone on this girl's trip. The picture was my first piece of real proof, the first undeniable glimpse behind a mask. From there, I began to dig deeper. I checked timestamps, locations embedded in photos, cross-referenced them with her claimed itinerary. Nothing lined up. The more I looked, the more the lies piled up like rubble. There were text messages buried deep in her phone, carefully deleted conversations recovered by an app I'd downloaded. Messages that weren't just friends chatting. Flirtatious words, plans to meet, hidden promises. Each message was a stab, but also confirmation. The financial trail followed. I noticed charges at restaurants and hotels in cities she never said she visited. Expensive dinners for 2, charges for taxis at odd hours. Every receipt I uncovered was like a jigsaw piece falling into place. Even her social media told a story she didn't want anyone to see. Tagged photos from nights out that didn't match her timeline, stories she deleted but were captured by friends. The web was tangled, and I was unraveling it thread by thread. But the most painful part wasn't the evidence. It was the realization that this had been happening right under my nose, that she'd spent months living a double life, weaving a story meant to fool not just me, but everyone around her. I kept the photos and messages hidden for now, afraid that if I confronted her too soon, it would all vanish like smoke. This was only the beginning. I was ready to see it through, no matter what it cost. The money never lies. That's what I told myself as I started digging into our accounts, looking for anything unusual. I knew Jenna was careful, too careful, but even the best liars leave traces when money's involved. I logged into our joint bank account late one night, the house silent around me. What I found wasn't just odd charges, it was a pattern, a slow drip of withdrawals and transfers to places and people she never mentioned. Small at first, barely noticeable, but over time, the amounts grew. There were charges at hotels and cities she denied visiting, dinners at upscale restaurants with names I didn't recognize, taxi fares at hours when she said she was home asleep, even a few payments to what looked like private clubs or spas, but with no names I could find in public records. I cross-checked the dates with the trip she claimed was just the girls. The timelines didn't match. The money trail led to places she never included in her stories. And there were charges I couldn't explain, like a week-long rental on a luxury car, or hotel suites with multiple nights billed under different names. At first, I thought maybe it was a secret gift she was planning or a surprise she wanted to keep. But deep down, I knew better. This was the currency of deception. I started printing statements, circling suspicious transactions, building a record. I wasn't just an angry husband anymore. I was a man preparing for battle. Every dollar she spent away from me was another lie added to the pile. The betrayal hit harder with every new discovery. Not just because she'd lied about the trip, but because she'd done it with money we'd earned together. The financial trust we'd built over years was gone, shattered into cold, hard numbers on a screen. It was clear now. Jenna's trip wasn't just girls. It was a carefully orchestrated escape, paid for with funds she had no right to use. And I was ready to expose every cent. Getting access to Jenna's phone felt like crossing a line I never wanted to approach. But by then, I knew I couldn't afford to wait for her to reveal the truth. The lock screen, the hidden apps, it was a fortress she built to keep me out. I spent nights figuring out patterns, guessing passwords, trying combinations. It wasn't just curiosity, it was desperation. The longer I stayed in the dark, the deeper the betrayal felt. Finally, one morning, when she was out, I slipped her phone off the charger and swiped the lock with the code I'd learned from a note she'd carelessly left visible. The screen lit up, and for a moment, I hesitated, heart pounding. But I needed answers more than I needed peace. Inside, I found what I feared: secret chats, deleted messages, hidden folders, apps she said she never used, conversations that made my stomach twist, flirtations, plans, promises that weren't meant for me. Some messages were raw, candid, her voice unguarded and free with someone else. Photos sent back and forth that matched the pictures in the email, moments she wanted hidden. There were moments of laughter, inside jokes, but also angry texts she never showed me. It was a side of her life I'd never known existed. What hurt most wasn't just the messages, but the realization that she'd built this double world right under my nose. A life where I was the outsider, the fool. I didn't confront her that day. I didn't call or send texts. I sat in silence, scrolling through the evidence, feeling a mix of rage, heartbreak, and cold resolve. I knew the truth now, and with that knowledge, I had power. But with power came responsibility. I couldn't let emotion make me reckless. I needed a plan, proof, something undeniable. This phone held the key to everything: her lies, her betrayals, her hidden life. And I was going to use it. The more I dug into Jenna's secret phone, the clearer it became. She was living a double life. Not just the occasional lie or hidden moment. An entire parallel world I'd never been part of. There were photos I'd never seen before. Her smiling with people I didn't know, in places I'd never been invited to. She had a whole social circle I didn't know existed, friends who never showed up at our house, events I wasn't told about. Her messages revealed a different Jenna, someone confident, carefree, and unburdened by the role she played with me. She wasn't just hiding an affair. She was hiding herself. I found chat groups where she joked about me, vented frustrations, and planned nights out she never mentioned. A side of her I didn't recognize, but that felt real and raw. Every detail chipped away at the life I thought we had built together. The wife I'd known was part of a story she'd rewritten behind my back. But what hurt most wasn't just the betrayal. It was realizing how easily she compartmentalized her life, how little room there was left for me in her world. I replayed memories, smiles that felt forced, conversations that now seemed rehearsed. I questioned every moment, every promise. This double life wasn't just a secret affair. It was a calculated distance. She'd built walls around me, and I hadn't seen the cracks until now. I knew confronting her would come later. For now, I had to gather every piece of this puzzle. I wasn't just fighting for truth. I was fighting for my own peace, my sense of self. And I was ready to tear down every lie she'd built, no matter how carefully constructed. At some point, I realized I couldn't carry this alone. The weight of what I'd uncovered was too much. The lies, the secrets, the slow-burning rage inside me. I needed someone I could trust, someone who'd listen without judgment and help me figure out what to do next. I reached out to my best friend, Mark. He'd known Jenna and me for years and had always been the voice of reason when life got complicated. When I told him what I'd found, I was half expecting disbelief or pity. Instead, he just listened, really listened, and then said, "We'll get through this, one step at a time." Mark helped me see beyond the chaos of emotions. He reminded me that I deserved the truth and that it was okay to fight for it. But he also warned me against acting too quickly. "You need proof, not just anger," he said. "The goal isn't just to hurt her back. It's to protect yourself and make sure you come out standing." With his support, I started organizing everything, the photos, the messages, the financial records, into a clear timeline. It was like assembling evidence for a case I never wanted to have to bring. But this was reality now. Mark even connected me with a lawyer friend who gave me a quick rundown of my options. It was overwhelming, but I needed to know where I stood legally before I made any moves. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of control. I wasn't just a victim. I was preparing to take action. Having someone by my side made the burden lighter. Mark didn't judge or rush me. He just offered steady support, a lifeline when everything else felt like it was falling apart. I still hadn't confronted Jenna, but I wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference. With Mark's support and the lawyer's advice, I knew it was time to stop just gathering fragments and start building a case. This wasn't just about heartbreak anymore. It was about justice and reclaiming control over my life. I began organizing every piece of evidence meticulously. The photos, the texts, the financial records, everything went into labeled folders, both digital and printed. I created timelines showing where she was supposed to be versus where the evidence said she actually was. Every detail mattered. I couldn't afford a single loose end or mistake. This was a battle of proof against lies, and I intended to win. I also started documenting my own experiences, the moments I'd noticed changes, the suspicions I'd kept quiet, the emotional toll it had taken. I wrote it all down, raw and unfiltered, to remind myself why I needed to see this through. The lawyer helped me understand the legal landscape, what I could expect in court, what kinds of evidence held weight, and how to protect myself from any counterclaims Jenna might make. I was nervous, but knowledge gave me strength. One night, I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by stacks of paper and a laptop glowing softly in the dark. I thought about how far things had fallen, about the wife I thought I knew and the reality I was facing. But I also thought about what I wanted next: honesty, respect, and a fresh start. This was more than just about ending a marriage. It was about rebuilding myself on my own terms. I steeled myself for what was coming. The confrontation, the court, the fallout. It wouldn't be easy, but I was ready. I wasn't just preparing for a fight. I was preparing to reclaim my life. The morning Jenna left for that trip, I watched from the kitchen window, trying to steady my racing heart. She was calm, smiling even, as if everything was normal. I told myself to keep quiet, to not ruin the facade for now. She hugged me goodbye, kissed my cheek softly, and said, "Just the girls. You'll be fine." Her words echoed in my mind, but the doubt was louder. I knew there was more to this than she'd said. As she drove away, I pulled out my phone and started tracking her location through an app she'd left connected to her account. The truth was mine to uncover, and I wasn't going to let her control the story any longer. Her first stop wasn't a spa or a hotel with friends. It was a small, discreet Airbnb in a part of town I didn't recognize. The picture she sent to me didn't match the location. The lie was already unraveling. For the next days, I tracked her movements: restaurants, late-night meetups, places she never mentioned. I saved every detail, every inconsistency. The thrill of discovery was cold, like peeling back a mask I thought I'd known forever. I kept a low profile, pretending everything was normal with friends and family. No one suspected what I knew. Inside, though, I was counting the days until I had enough evidence to expose the truth. Watching her live that double life was painful, but also strangely empowering. I was no longer blind or naive. I was awake, aware, and ready. That trip wasn't just a getaway. It was the turning point, the moment the illusion shattered and I began to take back my life, one truth at a time. The real turning point came when I finally opened the folder labeled Private on her phone, the photos she never meant me to see. There they were, all the proof I needed, pictures of Jenna with that man, close and carefree, in places she'd never told me about. There were shots of them laughing over candlelit dinners, selfies taken in hotel rooms, and moments caught off guard. Her face glowing, her eyes alight with something I hadn't seen in years. Each photo was a punch in the gut. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to see the proof laid out like a cruel slideshow. I scrolled through them in silence, heart pounding, mind racing through memories that suddenly felt like lies. Every smile she gave me, every promise whispered, they were shadows compared to what I was seeing now. But amid the hurt, a strange clarity settled in. These photos weren't just about betrayal. They were the key to my next move. I saved copies, backing them up securely. I knew I'd need this evidence, not just to confront Jenna, but to stand strong in court. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and reclaiming control over a life that had been built on deception. I stayed up late that night, going over every picture, every detail. I imagined the courtroom where these images would speak louder than any argument. It was a brutal moment, but it was mine. The moment I stopped being the victim and started becoming the man who would fight back. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was done hiding from the truth. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the undeniable proof in my hands and the resolve in my heart. You might think that once I had all the proof, I'd storm straight into her and demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. There was something about holding all those photos, messages, and receipts that made me pause. Anger burned beneath the surface, but so did caution. I needed to be smarter than that. This wasn't just about emotion anymore. I watched Jenna carefully, every move she made. I stayed calm, controlled. The confrontation I craved was replaced by strategy. If I lost my head, if I let the rage take over, I'd risk everything I wanted to protect. So I kept my distance, kept the truth to myself. I let her continue with her lies a little longer, knowing the moment to expose her would come, and it would be on my terms. It wasn't easy. Every smile from her felt like a knife twisting deeper. Every "I love you" sounded hollow. But I was patient. I had to be. Some nights, the silence between us was deafening. We passed like strangers, and I wondered how long she thought I'd stay blind. But I wasn't blind anymore. I wasn't the man who'd accept deception without consequence. I spent those weeks preparing, mentally and emotionally, for the day I'd finally pulled back the curtain. That day wasn't just a confrontation. It was the opening act in a fight I was determined to win. And when it came, it would be unforgettable. Once I decided I wasn't going to confront Jenna privately, I knew I needed to make the courtroom the stage for the truth. The photos, the messages, the financial proof, they had to come out in a place where lies couldn't hide. I started working with my lawyer to figure out the best way to present everything. It wasn't just about piling on evidence. It was about telling the story clearly and powerfully, showing everyone exactly what had been going on behind closed doors. Every photo, every text message, every bank statement would be laid out for all to see. The moment those images flashed across the courtroom screen, there'd be no denying the betrayal. We planned the timing carefully. I wanted to catch her off guard, but also ensure the judge and everyone present would understand the full scope of her deception. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice and reclaiming my life with undeniable proof. It felt strange, building this case as if preparing for war. But that's exactly what it was. A battle for truth, for dignity, for everything I thought we had. The anticipation was heavy. I rehearsed how I'd speak, how I'd stay calm and focused while revealing the depth of her lies. I knew some in our circle would be shocked, maybe even turn against me. But I was ready to face that. The truth was more important than appearances or sympathy. This courtroom surprise wasn't just a strategy. It was a statement. A declaration that I wasn't a fool anymore. When the day came, the photos would speak louder than any words. And I'd finally have my chance to close this chapter on my terms. Filing those divorce papers felt like crossing a line I never thought I'd reach. It wasn't just a document. It was a declaration that the life we'd built was over. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, pen trembling in my hand as I signed. The weight of it crushed me, but beneath the pain was a fierce resolve. I wasn't just ending a marriage. I was reclaiming my future. My lawyer had prepared everything meticulously. The evidence I'd gathered was carefully included in the filing. This wasn't just about breaking up. It was about holding Jenna accountable for every lie and every betrayal. I sent the papers, feeling the silence stretch in the room. When Jenna got them, I didn't know how she'd react. Part of me feared rage. Another part hoped for some sign of remorse. The truth was, I was ready for anything. After all the lies, the secrets, the stolen moments, I had found my strength in the facts. Legal moves became my focus. Every step was calculated, every decision made with care. I wasn't going to let emotions cloud what needed to be done. I felt a strange mixture of grief and empowerment. Grief for the life we'd lost, and empowerment in knowing I was taking control again. The road ahead was uncertain and probably messy, but I was prepared to face it head on. This was no longer about Jenna's story. It was about mine. The day I filed those papers was painful, but it was also the first step toward freedom. Walking into the courtroom that day, my heart felt like a drum pounding in my chest. The sterile air, the wooden benches, the silent eyes, it all felt so surreal. This was no longer a private battle. It was public, real, and irreversible. Jenna was there, looking calm, but I could see the flicker of nerves beneath her practiced smile. The room held our friends, family, even strangers who knew nothing but sensed the tension. The judge called the hearing to order, her voice sharp but fair. I sat beside my lawyer, clutching the folder filled with every piece of evidence I had painstakingly collected. This was my moment. Jenna's lawyers started with empty denials, trying to paint the picture of misunderstanding, of harmless trips, and miscommunication. I felt my jaw tighten, but I held my composure. I wasn't here to argue emotion. I was here to present truth. When it was my turn, I laid out the timeline. The emails, the photos, the financial irregularities. Each piece of evidence was a nail sealing the coffin of the lies Jenna had spun for months. The judge watched carefully as the evidence unfolded. I caught glimpses of her expression, calm, yet unmistakably acknowledging the gravity of what she was hearing. The atmosphere shifted. The whispers stopped. The courtroom felt heavier, as if everyone realized this was more than just a divorce. It was the unveiling of a carefully hidden betrayal. Though the hearing was just the beginning, I felt a surge of relief. The truth was finally out in the open. For the first time in months, I felt like I was reclaiming control, not just over the situation, but over my life. The fight wasn't over, but this day was a powerful first step toward justice. Jenna's defense was a calculated performance, designed to sow doubt and protect her carefully constructed story. Her lawyer spun words like a web, trying to trap me in uncertainty. She claimed the trip was innocent, that the photos were taken out of context, that the financial irregularities were misunderstandings or honest mistakes. She painted herself as the victim of a bitter husband's imagination. Hearing those words hit me harder than any betrayal. The audacity to twist reality, to deny what was so clearly in front of us all, was staggering. But I didn't let it break me. I sat silent, letting the lies roll over me while mentally preparing my next move. It wasn't just about disproving her story. It was about showing the court the depth of her deception. Every detail mattered. The timestamps on photos, the messages between them, the undeniable trail of money. I watched as the judge listened intently, eyes sharp and unyielding. She wasn't buying the excuses. The cracks were showing in Jenna's story, and it was only a matter of time before the truth fully emerged. Jenna's face held a mask of calm, but I caught glimpses of desperation when the evidence was laid bare. The confident facade faltered, even if just for a moment. This wasn't the woman I married. This was someone who'd chosen lies over loyalty, deception over honesty. Despite the pain, I felt a fierce determination. The fight was no longer just personal. It was a quest for justice and closure. And no amount of lies would stop me from exposing the truth. When the judge finally called on me to speak, I felt a surge of nerves, but also clarity. This was my moment to tell my story, to let the truth be heard loud and clear. I stood, took a deep breath, and began. I spoke not just about the photos or the messages, but about the years of trust that had been shattered, about the quiet moments when doubt gnawed at me, the lies woven into everyday life. I described how I discovered the truth piece by piece, the financial inconsistencies, the secret phone, the hidden messages. I explained how betrayal isn't just about one moment. It's a slow unraveling of everything you thought was real. As I spoke, I saw the judge's eyes fixed on me, listening with a weight that made me feel both exposed and empowered. This wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I didn't hold back the pain, the anger, or the disappointment. I let it all show, because hiding it would have been denying what I'd been through. But I also spoke of resolve, how I wasn't here just to accuse, but to seek justice and start rebuilding. The courtroom was silent, hanging on every word. I could feel the truth settling in, breaking through the fog of lies. When I finished, I sat down, heart pounding, hoping my voice had made the difference. In that moment, I was no longer a victim. I was a man reclaiming his story, standing firm against the betrayal. The fight wasn't over, but my turn had come, and I was ready. When a moment came to reveal the photos in court, I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. The room was quiet as the screen lit up, each image projected for everyone to see. There they were, the proof. Jenna with the man she'd hidden from me, the smiles that weren't meant for my eyes, the late-night dinners, the stolen moments caught on camera. Each photo was a story of betrayal, laid bare for the judge, lawyers, and witnesses. The reaction was immediate. I saw gasps, exchanged glances, even a few jaws tighten in disbelief. Jenna's calm mask cracked, her eyes darting between the images as if searching for an escape. For me, it was both painful and liberating. Painful because these pictures confirmed what I'd long suspected. Liberating because the truth was finally undeniable. I watched the judge lean forward, absorbing every detail. The photos weren't just pictures. They were evidence, silent but powerful witnesses to the lies and deception. In that moment, I realized the battle wasn't just mine anymore. The courtroom held the weight of my pain and my resolve. The photos told a story no words could fully capture. A story of trust broken, of a life shattered, but also of a man determined to reclaim his dignity. As the last image faded, I felt a quiet strength rise within me. This was justice in its rawest form, the truth unmasked. The path ahead was uncertain, but with the truth on display, I knew I was one step closer to closure. The courtroom was silent after the photos flashed across the screen. I could feel every eye on Jenna, every heartbeat in the room synchronized with mine. The shock was palpable, a collective gasp that seemed to ripple through the walls. Friends, family, even strangers sat frozen, processing what they had just witnessed. The betrayal was no longer a whispered secret. It was an undeniable truth laid bare for all to see. I caught Jenna's gaze for a brief moment. Her eyes, once so confident, were wide with fear and disbelief. The mask had slipped, revealing a vulnerability she never showed at home. The judge's expression was unreadable, but I sensed a shift, a quiet acknowledgement of the gravity of what had been exposed. This wasn't just another divorce case anymore. It was a story of lies, deception, and broken trust. I saw a few people in the courtroom glance at me with new respect, as if recognizing the courage it took to stand there and share my truth so openly. Despite the pain, a wave of relief washed over me. The truth was out. The hidden betrayal couldn't hide behind smiles or excuses anymore. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for Jenna, but for me, for the man who had been hurt, yet refused to be broken. The room remained heavy with tension, but beneath it, I felt a quiet strength. This shock was a turning point, a moment where the past shadows began to lift. Whatever came next, I knew one thing clearly. I was no longer a prisoner of lies. I was free, free to rebuild, to heal, and to move forward on my own terms. The days after the hearing were a strange blur, a mix of relief, pain, and uncertainty. The truth was out, but the consequences were just beginning to unfold. Friends and family who had been on the sidelines started to take sides. Some reached out with sympathy, others whispered behind closed doors. Social circles shifted, and invitations stopped coming. Jenna retreated, the confident woman I once knew replaced by someone guarded and distant. The lies had cost her more than just trust. They cost her a place in the life we'd built. For me, the aftermath was a reckoning. The house felt emptier, the silence louder. But beneath the loneliness, there was a spark of something new, a chance to rebuild from the ruins. I started focusing on myself for the first time in years. Small things at first, a morning run, reading books I'd shelved, reconnecting with old friends. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but I was learning to carry it differently. Not as a burden, but as a reminder of how strong I could be. I realized that healing wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, memories would flood back, but I faced them head-on instead of running away. The divorce wasn't just legal. It was emotional, spiritual, and deeply personal. But I was determined to come out the other side whole. This wasn't just an ending. It was the start of something new, a story of resilience, of growth, and of reclaiming my life on my own terms. The aftermath was messy, painful, but ultimately necessary. And through it all, I began to find myself again. Reclaiming my life wasn't a sudden moment. It was a slow, steady process, like pulling myself up from deep underwater. After the dust settled, I realized that the man who walked out of that courtroom wasn't the same one who had walked in. I started setting boundaries, with Jenna, with friends, even with myself. No more silence, no more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I took back control piece by piece, deciding how my life would move forward. I found strength in small victories, a morning run without looking back, a new hobby discovered, a conversation with someone who saw me beyond the pain. Each step was a reclaiming, a quiet defiance against what had been stolen. I learned to trust myself again, to listen to my own needs and desires. For years, I'd lost myself in the marriage, in the image of the perfect couple. Now, I was learning to be whole on my own. The pain of betrayal lingered, but it no longer defined me. Instead, it became a catalyst for growth, a reminder that I was capable of surviving, of thriving, even when the foundation crumbled. I started making plans for the future, not the life I'd imagined, but one I was building from scratch. It was daunting, but exhilarating. Friends and family who saw my transformation began to rally around me. Their support was a balm, a reminder that I wasn't alone. Reclaiming my life wasn't just about healing. It was about becoming the person I was always meant to be. And with each passing day, I felt that person growing stronger. As I began to rebuild, I was surprised by the support that came my way. Some friends I thought might turn away instead stood firmly by my side, offering quiet strength when I needed it most. There were conversations I never expected, heartfelt messages, phone calls, even visits that reminded me I wasn't alone in this fight. People shared their own stories of betrayal and recovery, giving me a sense of community and understanding. My family rallied around me, providing the comfort and encouragement that helped steady my spirit. Their belief in me was a foundation I could lean on when everything else felt shaky. Even strangers reached out. Messages online from people who'd seen the case or heard whispers, thanking me for speaking up and giving them hope to confront their own struggles. This unexpected support became a lifeline. It reminded me that pain doesn't have to isolate you. It can connect you to others who understand. Through it all, I learned to accept help, not as weakness, but as a strength. It was humbling and empowering. The road to healing is never traveled alone, and I was beginning to see the faces of those who would walk it with me. This support didn't erase the past, but it helped me carry it with more grace and courage. I realized that sometimes the hardest battles reveal the strongest bonds, and in that I found new hope. Looking back, it's clear that the end of my marriage was not just a loss. It was a beginning, a painful, necessary breaking open that made room for something new. I'm not the same man who sat quietly while the truth hid behind lies. I'm stronger, wiser, and more certain of who I am. The journey hasn't been easy. Healing rarely is. There were moments of doubt, loneliness, and raw pain. But through it all, I found resilience I never knew I had. This experience taught me that betrayal isn't the end of your story. It's a chapter, a brutal one, but just a chapter. I learned to trust again, not blindly, but with eyes wide open, to love myself fiercely, and to set boundaries that protect my peace. I rebuilt my life piece by piece, crafting a new identity beyond the shadows of deception. A life where honesty, respect, and truth guide my path. And with every step forward, I felt a quiet pride in how far I'd come. I'm not defined by what happened. I'm defined by how I responded. My wife's lies opened my eyes, but they didn't break me. They made me stronger. This is my story of betrayal, truth, and reclaiming my life. And it's only just beginning.